In recent days, South Korea shared a new AI strategy that brings together infrastructure investment, talent development, and regulatory reform to push it ahead of the global AI race. We address this ambition on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday, February 26th here in Seoul, and you're watching Press Perspective. South Korea is aiming to stand among the world's top 3 in artificial intelligence. For more on this ambition, I have Thomas Maresca with American International News Agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks, great to be here.
I also have Steven Borowiec with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio as well. Steven, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Always a pleasure.
Right, Thomas, we'll start with you. Let's start off then with this ambitious announcement by acting President Choi Sang-mok last week. What were the details of his announcement?
Right, so as you mentioned in the intro, acting President Choi basically outlined a blueprint for kind of kickstarting the AI industry here, or ratcheting it up, and with the goal of becoming a top 3 AI powerhouse in the world. And it was a series of investments and policy initiatives and infrastructure plans. The first part of it, he mentioned wanting to build the world's best large language model, which is the kind of AI system that something like ChatGPT by OpenAI is. So he wants Korea to have its own homegrown version of that would be the world's best. And then there are just policies to sort of attract talent and build infrastructure. And he's mentioned a 1 trillion won, which is like 700 plus million USD, investment for like an R&D investment to work on artificial general intelligence, which is kind of the next, the holy grail, the next level of AI that would be more kind of independent and make, decision-making kind of version of that. So he wants South Korea to work on that. And then he mentioned a 2 trillion won investment for a state-run AI data center, which would include securing 10,000, of these advanced GPU powerful chips by this year, and then an additional 8,000 by the middle of next year to power this data center. There's tax incentives for AI businesses, an AI model sharing sort of platform for public and private sector to share their information. And he also mentioned by 2027, a 3 trillion won AI startup fund to stimulate the kind of startup sector to develop AI. Products, platform services, et cetera.
Right. Stephen, as Thomas just mentioned, Korea's AI plan, it also includes securing a total of 18,000 GPUs by mid next year. For the sake of lay people like myself, what are GPUs and why are they essential in AI?
Let me just flag that I'm also a layperson here, but my understanding is that these are graphics processing units and that they're a big part of AI power, and specifically what they do is they are a mechanism to turn data into visualizations on a screen. And ideally they operate in what's called parallel processing, so you can have them kind of working off to the side while handling a number of complicated tasks, while also having the kind of main part of the system handle some other kind of task that AI is adept at. So I think they're just a key part of the kind of infrastructure that a country like Korea needs in order to advance its vision for AI and to make good on the parts that Thomas outlined.
Right, then perhaps as proof of their importance, the Biden administration, Thomas, before it left office last month, slapped last-minute export restrictions, that is, on AI GPUs to China before stepping down. Now, this particular move was also condemned by companies like Nvidia. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular restriction, the reason behind it, and of course the response?
Right, so this was, in January before leaving office, the administration passed its a framework. It's called the AI diffusion rule, and it's not just actually restricting exports to China. It's sort of breaking the world up into 3 different baskets of sort of friendly, kind of neutral, and then China, Russia, Iran, Belarus would be restricted from, from receiving exports of these advanced GPU chips. This is also in line with the Biden administration had been already restricting, the semiconductor shipments to China. And I mean, it's basically framed, there's a sort of an economic part to it, but it's really framed as a national security issue. Pretty much outright saying that they want to stop China from developing AI, to catch up to the US because China, they say, would use it in military applications. So that's, it's sort of framed as this kind of direct national security question, but also it falls in line with the sort of, the Biden administration's shaping of framing of the world as a kind of battle between democracies and autocracy. So it's kind of playing in that field. The response, as you mentioned, companies like Nvidia, which is by far the largest supplier of these GPUs to the global AI market, and the Semiconductor Industry Association in the US have spoken out against it. Clearly, from their business perspective, you're stopping them from selling chips to any and all who would take it. So they're very much against it. I mean, they also are trying to argue that it's going to end up stifling the overall entire industry. So they're sort of saying it may backfire from its intended purpose. The bigger question now is this framework was laid out, but there's actually a 120-day comment period before it's enacted. So it's led into this current Trump administration. The question is, how is the Trump administration going to adjust it, enforce it? And on one hand, you think Trump sort of tends to want to overturn everything his predecessors did, but the latest reporting I've seen is that the administration may actually look to strengthen it even more. I mean, partly, I think China's development of this DeepSeek, new AI model that really shook up the industry with how effective it is, has kind of, maybe caused a reaction or caused some, a sense of concern. And so there has been some reporting that the Trump administration may be looking to make this even stronger. They were meeting with officials from Japan and Netherlands to try to convince them to kind of stop the maintenance of certain chip-making equipment that is being used by China. Just trying to work on many levels to hobble or limit China's own, chip-making prowess.
Right. Thomas, earlier you mentioned how this particular restriction, it divides up the world into 3 different baskets. Mm-hmm. In what basket does South Korea belong to?
Right, so South Korea is in this tier 1, which is the friends, the friends and family kind of plan, and it's, I believe, 18 countries, and it's basically Western Europe, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. And so they really have no restrictions as far as exports. Then most of the rest of the world is this tier 2, and that's something, I believe the limit is meant to be 50,000 GPUs per year for the next few years. That's how it's laid out. But some countries can try to obtain what's called a validated end user certification, which would mean they're complying with US regulations, and they would get a chance to receive more. And then this tier 3 is, they're basically arms embargo nations. It's China, Russia, Iran, Macau is in that, Belarus. And so, right, they would basically be restricted from getting anything. But already China, even now, can't even receive some of Nvidia's powerful graphics cards that are the kinds of things that people use in their own personal computers. I mean, China is already quite restricted from receiving these, GPUs. And, they've, mentioning the DeepSeek, they've still managed to actually sort of shock the AI industry by creating something so powerful with the limits that they already have in place. And again, the industry, the GPU industry is against this. And one of their arguments is also that this may just spur China to continue to develop its own solutions faster. So that's one possible argument.
Right, and against this backdrop, Stephen, back here in South Korea, an AI seminar took place last week with pundits calling on the government to place priority on AI infrastructure. Do tell us why.
The consensus, as I understand it, is that it makes more sense, more kind of broad-based sense to set up an infrastructure under which Korean companies could collaborate to develop more kind of longer lasting and more kind of durable advancements in AI, instead of kind of like going all in on one product or one service, or putting all of one's eggs in one basket to kind of develop a longer lasting thing that is a kind of investment in South Korea's AI future. It wasn't like reading up about this. The idea was like set up data centers, set up energy storage centers, like set up the things that companies need in order to develop their own technologies or to apply existing artificial technology to what they're already doing. It wasn't totally clear to me like exactly how the public and private interests would overlap or would coexist here. Like if this is a government-run infrastructure, is this something that like anybody could use? Of course, when you're dealing with really advanced technology like AI, there's a certain level of secrecy that is kind of inherent to this sort of research. Companies would surely not want to be sharing some kind of public platform that other companies have access to. But I mean, I think it makes sense in a sort of general sense in that this technology is taking over so many areas of the economy. It's becoming increasingly important. It makes sense to have a national AI infrastructure in the same way that you would have a national manufacturing infrastructure or a national construction infrastructure. Again, that being a sort of guiding, overriding logic to all of it, but I think there's a lot of details to be worked out.
Right, for sure. Thomas, staying with the importance of AI infrastructure, the Wall Street Journal last week announced an AI data center with up to 3 gigawatts of power to be built here in South Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular initiative and its significance?
Yes, right. So this is an initiative that's being led basically by an investment group, one of the heads of which is Brian Koo, who's the grandson of the founder of LG. And it's meant to, deal was signed with Jeollanam-do, South Jeolla province to locate it there. And it would be the world's largest data center with up to 3 gigawatts of power. And, by comparison, that's something like 3 times the planned, there's this Stargate project in the US that's being backed by OpenAI and SoftBank, and that would be a 1 gigawatt basically center. This is like 3 times the power of that. And this is, in response to the enormous amount of energy that these data centers require for the enormous amount of processing that AI requires, and is expected to just continue to need more and more. So the plan, it's investments, I think it's a 10 billion tranche at first, but it may go up to 35 billion overall, they've said. And I think as far as the South Korean government's interest, it also would bring development to an area that's outside of Seoul. I mean, so much is concentrated around the Seoul area, so this is something in a province that could use kind of investment. And they're claiming that it would create 10,000 jobs and would turn around 3.5 billion in revenue annually. That's, of course, these are all just plans at this point. But it's something that would become, clearly, if it were to come to fruition, would help cement South Korea as an AI center for the world. And this is the kind of place that, other countries and companies could turn to for their AI, data needs. I mean, there are campuses also springing up in places like India, Thailand, Malaysia that are cheaper, the land is cheaper, the labor is cheaper, so South Korea will obviously be competing in that front. But this is, a fairly bold initiative, still something that's, the ground is yet to be broken on it, but it's, a big plan anyway.
Right. Ultimately, Steven, the plan for South Korea is to rank among the world's top 3 in AI. At the moment, what is the global AI ranking as evaluated by Stanford University's Global AI Vibrancy Tool? And let's start off with what that vibrancy tool is actually.
Well, it measures the in a kind of qualitative and quantitative way, the AI power that any country has, and that comes from research papers that are published, the amount of public and private investments, and the amount of patents that are coming. So, like, how much is this country investing in developing artificial intelligence, and like, what are they, broadly speaking, like, what are the kind of results that they are coming up with? And that's both on the research side and both on the commercial side in terms of the products and services that they're patenting. South Korea currently ranks 7th, and the top 4 are the US, China, the UK, and India. And my understanding is that the reason that the US has the lead is because they've got Silicon Valley, they've got an extraordinary amount of private investment. They've got all kinds of millionaires and billionaires who are interested in the potential of this technology and are putting up large sums of money to see where it can go. I mean, the US also has a big advantage in that it attracts talented people from all over the world. It's got great universities. It's got a number of major companies that are headquartered there. So it's got a lot of things in its favor. I mean, I'd be interested to see if perhaps these rankings could change over the next couple of years. There's a lot of changes afoot in the United States right now as pertains to public investment in almost anything, and immigration, and all of the kinds of relevant variables. So we'll also see if maybe Korea can move up the rankings on the back of some of the public investments that we've been discussing here.
Right, from 7th to 3rd, then that's what Korea is aiming for. Thomas, to allow for safe and sustainable AI advances, South Korea is the second in the world to enact an AI development framework. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular framework?
Right, so this is kind of got a longer official title, but it's basically known as the AI Basic Act. And it was a bundle of about 19 bills that had been floating around the National Assembly into one act. And some of it was passed in December, and then I think finally sort of formalized in January, and it will go into effect in a year, next January. And it's basically meant to, both promote and foster AI development, but also address ethical safety concerns and create kind of a regulatory framework. And it's the second one in the world, as you mentioned. The first was by the EU, the EU's AI Act. And so, beyond the sort of promotion and R&D and standardization, AI cluster kind of side of it, the big thing that people are really talking about is this regulatory framework. And it's basically addressing kind of taking a risk-based approach to AI, applications. And so the South Korean version is focusing on a couple of things, mainly what is called high-impact AI. The EU version calls it high-risk AI, but South Korea is calling it high-impact. And those are applications that have a high impact on human safety and well-being. And these are things like health care, hiring, loan screening, biometric data analysis, things in the energy and the transportation sector. So wherever AI is, being used in those areas, it's going to set out, transparency regulations, safety regulations, and kind of obligations of the operators, around this regulatory framework. And so it's kind of a risk management thing. There has to be human oversight involved. And the other big area that they're focusing on is generative AI, which is, video and sound and the things that we see flying around on the internet these days that are, becoming kind of increasingly hard to tell what's real and what's AI generated. So part of it is they're stipulating that any generated AI must clearly be labeled that it's AI output, and this is especially things that are mimicking real life people, their voices and images. And this is something that's becoming an issue globally. I was going to mention that Hybe, the entertainment company, actually just signed a memorandum with the North Gyeonggi Province Police Department today to work on a kind of a deep fake task force, to protect their own artists from having their likenesses used in deepfakes, and we know South Korea's already had kind of other deepfake scandals. So we're seeing it play out in other sectors of the society. And I think overall it sort of fits in. I would say South Korea is a little more in line with what the EU is doing on sort of antitrust and digital platform regulation, whereas the US still kind of maintains a very laissez-faire approach to this. South Korea has been stronger on something like antitrust regulations against digital platforms like Google. And so that's, it's kind of fitting into this approach that South Korea seems to be taking towards the evolving, technology market.
Right, and beyond national borders, Steven, there are critics who point out that safety, it took a back seat at the Paris AI summit. Do you agree, and do you fear that this perhaps might lead to some concerning developments in the near future?
Well, this flows very naturally from the previous discussion in that J.D. Vance was there, and when he addressed this audience in Paris, he said he was there to talk about opportunities and not risks. And I think what he meant by that was he was not really interested in discussing the potential downsides or the potentially dangerous elements of AI, how AI can be a very powerful tool in the hands of someone who has nefarious intentions and can potentially create great amounts of harm. He said that he wanted to focus discussion on the commercial potential of AI and talk about this as a tool for creating wealth and for making people's lives easier and all the rest. If you wanted to quibble with Vance's remarks, I think just on a purely rhetorical level, you could say that this, of course, if you want to have a nuanced understanding of it, of course it is something that does have opportunities, but it also carries risks, and it's probably not wise to act as though this is something that purely has positive potential. It could also have negative potential. So, I mean, the big, I think, like taking a step back, the big risk is as things like deep learning technology become more and more advanced, when these machines get to the point where they can resist human intervention, when they can teach themselves things, and when they can learn to defy what a human in a supervisory role might tell it to do, and that could go in all kinds of different directions. And I think that Vance's priority was getting as much as possible out of this as a tool for economic growth before putting any kind of regulatory limitations on this. There's reason to be nervous about that, because that AI will be a very difficult genie to put back in the bottle if we ever decide that it has gone too far. But this, I guess, is of a piece with the current U.S. administration's stances on lots of things like climate and other kinds of international, the World Health Organization, they're just generally not a fan of international cooperation to create regulations and to create consensus that there ought to be certain sensible limitations on the application of different kinds of technology. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right, which is also why the U.S. did not sign on to the joint statement after the Paris AI Summit this year. All right, Steven, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Thomas, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of Wednesday's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Do join us again same time tomorrow.